Welcome to Kevin Richards VIPs. Today's guest is an award-winning producer, director, and writer, and an amazing mom. My guest today is Jennifer Podemski. This has been an interview I've been looking forward to for a while, and definitely going to be very informative. I'm sitting in the kitchen with my guest today, Jennifer. Jennifer, welcome to Kevin Richards VIPs.
Hello, thank you.
I am so glad you're on the show because I want some answers, as I'm sure some people do, about certain things that have to do with Native, Indian, First Nation, and all that aspect. But before we get there, let's find out a bit about you. Welcome to Barrie. You've been here how long?
I've been in Barrie for about 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, I was in Innisfil for about 4 years or 3 years.
Okay.
And
what
then
brought you up here? Because you were in Toronto before that.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Toronto, and then I guess I had a baby, and I thought, you know what, this is a bit crazy.
It's a bit dodgy in the city, isn't it?
It's not. When I was in grade 1, I was already taking the subway by myself. Like, it's a different world today. I was always worried that I would have my kids wouldn't know the Toronto that I knew.
Yeah.
But now I feel like I'm so happy that we made this move.
So it was more for a family reason you came
for
up
family reasons, and
Nice.
then my parents are divorced for many, many years, and my mom had lived in Aurelia at the time, and my dad was in Toronto, so Barrie seemed like a nice halfway point. Plus the lake, and it's a growing city. I work from home
What do you do?
primarily. I'm an actor and television producer,
Cool.
filmmaker, and I own a production company, so I
Very cool.
pretty much work from home, but of course travel a lot, so
Nice.
it didn't really matter where I was.
So then, obviously, you came up here for family as well, though, too, and you've got this really cool career. But you are such a mom, and this is so funny because I show up here and we start to get set up, and I look around, and there are dolls and toys, and you name it, like recording kind of equipment as well, too. So your kids must be following a lot of what you do as well.
Yes, it's it's sort of it's hard to prevent your children from the exposure to the industry that I'm in. I mean, my husband is in the entertainment industry as well. He's a hip hop artist.
Oh, nice.
And music producer. So we're constantly, my kids grew up going to shows for their dad. Like, they'll be at a concert and know all of his songs, and they've been on set with me. I travel all the time. They've been at shows I've produced. They've been at shows that I've performed in. It's hard when you're a performing family to hide your kids from it. So our kids are just already, they're like in it.
Well, they would be submersed in it around here. I can see that. You've
definitely
got DJ equipment all the way to old classic vinyl record players, which I love because, I kind of took a little peek over there. You've got some great old jazz. You've got Lauryn Hill. You've got some of my favorites.
Yeah.
And to get the kids involved and, included in that sort of aspect of your life, it's good.
Yeah.
It teaches them a lot of responsibility, but a lot of creativity.
I think it was a great outlet for me, like, throughout my life. So I figure if it's here, why hide it? They have the ability to, if they have the bug, the bug
itch
to perform or create, then let's just get it over with now and start them early.
That's good. So I look around too, and I see that there's clearly an artistic aspect into your home as well too. And you know what? It's no secret that I'm a big fan from in the 80s, where I just loved Norval Morrisseau, right? And you said you had a few pieces of that. We were talking earlier off camera.
We have two Norval pieces. They're signed lithographs.
Oh, it's amazing.
We definitely keep an eye out for them. I was lucky enough to have spent some time with Norval.
Wow. Was it out west?
No, it was here it was in Toronto. I produce a live event called the Inspire Awards, and he was a recipient of that award right prior to his passing, obviously. He actually passed away before the award was given to him, so I think I might have been the last person to interview him on camera. And it was quite an honor because he is such an interesting artist, because the work that he was doing, like there's so many stories that I read about him prior to interviewing him, but that his ability to astral travel and kind of his connection to spirit and spirit world and all of these teachings, what he did with the art and the fine art was tell these stories, these sort of ceremonial stories of the Anishinaabe people, and was blacklisted for pretty much most of his life.
Okay. So why was he blacklisted?
Because there was a belief, and this is only to my knowledge from what I understand from the situation, that he was telling stories that were ceremonial and
that's private
in the art. Well, I think it's, there was a sense that it was sacred.
Okay.
And, that might be true, but there are a lot of other elements around why it's important to perpetuate and push those stories forward.
Sure. Well, he did tell amazing stories in his art beyond what most people can probably tell in a picture or in a painting to canvas. He did that.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of move around something here, and only because, and this is not just me, I'm sure a lot of people, we tend to be a society where everybody gets sort of politically incorrect or correct, and everybody's offending everybody. But I know that even, we were talking earlier off camera, and I said something about Native art, and I was worried that I was going to offend you or somebody. It's not like a Merry Christmas where everybody just wants to make a big hoopla about that. This is somebody's identity and their past and their history and their culture, and I don't want to disrespect anybody. So what is the difference, really, honestly, between Native, First Nations, and Indian? Why are people offended by Indian? And let's cover that a little bit.
Well, I think it depends. I don't think there's... maybe you've been exposed to people who are offended, and I think there's just such a diversity of opinions and perspectives, so I can only really tell you mine. I know within my family, like, when you're talking about yourselves, you refer yourself to yourself as Indian. I guess you and all of those other people who are asking or curious are only limited by what they've been taught
and the information available, because we're almost told to be offended. That's the kind of hype, is we're not necessarily really offending people, but we're almost told to be offended or told that we're offending someone. So everybody's on eggshells.
Well, I think it's so complex. I think that the first issue is, prior to settlers coming to this
500 years ago,
country or this territory, this land, there were many, many, many different nations with different languages and people who sort of coexisted upwards of something like 40,000 years. And upon the arrival of those settlers, there were belief systems that were kind of that started to penetrate to that, let's call it the settler mentality. And a lot of that happened even before people got here, propaganda and creating ideas of, who these people were here.
Because the people who were here, the new pioneers, the new frontier, wanted to seem like we are. Who are they?
Absolutely.
Let them serve us almost.
Well, and there's, the other element is, the doctrine of discovery, which is it's a belief system that, you overtake the savage and you convert the savage to your belief system, and that sort of played a huge role in how the relationship started here.
Well, it's like the aspect of what would happen if all the immigrants that were here now suddenly took over and decided to change.
Well, and that, we're talking about, immigrants or any kind of new people that came in that, there's a lot of discussion around, do we as Canadians let people in or not let people in? So, I mean, the allegory would be if a new people came into Canada and took, their education system was something we were all, we were all exposed to and forced to live within, that sort of thing, that story would be repeating itself. So, I mean, it's a complex issue. So let's say, you know, the system that we live in now, and the reason you don't know and other people don't know, you know, who an Anishinaabe person is, or what territory we're on, or that there are hundreds and hundreds of different nations or different dialects and languages, is because for many of those years, like hundreds of years, that stuff was hidden, and there was, you know, a huge effort towards cultural genocide in a way that would be, you know, through residential school. But even before residential school, which was a system that happened across the country, where children would be stolen from their homes and put into schools to unlearn their language and culture, and then be kind of put into mainstream society and assimilated.
Now, do you find that there's a lot of people, how do I put it? There's ways people are offended, though, too, where you've got the Chicago Blackhawks, the Cleveland Indians, you have things like that, the Atlanta Braves, and people are like, are you kidding me? How can there still be teams called this?
Right.
But do you find that offensive?
I do find it offensive in the sense that it's not in itself the actual name or the word or the appropriation of these ideas and concepts, but it's the fact that for so many generations, we didn't exist in the consciousness, but these ideas.
But you look great on a shirt.
They identify a certain people in a very one-dimensional way.
Absolutely.
So it's one of those things that, if perpetuated and if not addressed, it tends to just be something that is. It becomes acceptable, and it's not acceptable when there's a bigger conversation happening, which is, you know what, we cannot live in this relationship anymore. This relationship has to change.
So I see certain things, though, not just sports, but sports, for example, and the way I see that it's, you know, I'm getting the most honest opinion of what's going on TV, because as I get older, I kind of become more blind to seeing these things, and being politically incorrect is just kind of natural for a lot of people. But when my kids see the Atlanta Braves and they're doing this tomahawk thing, and my daughter, who's 8 years old, looks at me and says, is that right? That's when I know that's where the offensive is. It's being taught. We're taught to be offended, but we're taught that this sometimes too, that this stuff is just okay and ignore it. But what do you see on the way to correct that? Is it more education? Is it more what?
I think a lot of it has to do with the education system, and you know, it took a long time to get to where we are. You know, a lot of, I mean, we're talking about like very intense propaganda, right? Like it's not cool to steal children.
It's not.
And that was something that happened here not too long ago. And some of my friends were in residential school, and I'm 44. You know,
like, I don't know if people
this is
realize
not that long ago, right?
People are still stealing children.
And there's, you know, a very broken child welfare system. There are, you know, there are remnants of systemic racism and still other things that are happening that are posing a real challenge to.
Well, look at the missing women up north. Are these Indigenous women?
Well, there are a lot of missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Trudeau is trying to pioneer this a little bit and trying to help not just find them, but making people aware. Do you find that in politics right now, do you think it's more about face and public appearance, or do you think that they're genuinely trying to maybe make a change? What do you think?
I don't know. I guess...
you don't think it's just...
Probably public appearance.
You'd want to believe different,
I would like to believe differently, though. I would like to believe that somewhere in there, you know, someone in charge, or at least some people in charge, or people with influence, have a genuine interest in shifting this storyline. Yeah. You know, so that the next generation, you know, like Cindy Blackstock, the incredible child welfare advocate, says, so that we can raise a generation of Indigenous children who don't have to recover from their childhoods, and a generation of non-Indigenous children who never have to say they're sorry. That's a quote from her.
That's a great quote.
That gave me shivers, and I thought, you know what? That's that's kind of what my new vision for the future is. And it's, you know, we need to change the story.
And that's a great message.
Yeah.
It really is. Because, and again, back to the innocence of, you know, watching a movie with my children and we see Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, great, an old classic, Peter Pan. And then there's a moment I get uncomfortable because there's this whole song, What Makes the Red Man Red? And you're like, are you kidding me? This is going on? How did Peter Pan, a classic, have this incredible, it's almost horrific to watch. It's an uncomfortable 5 minutes of the movie where you're watching them sing about the reason the red is from choking on smoke and all these different things. And you're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So what is your message then, maybe to children, or what do you teach your children on a Native aspect to either, you know, let it deflect and not think about it, or to understand it and just go, okay, look, this is just what people are taught? Like, how do you look at it?
Well, no, I think you have to come at it from an educational standpoint and say, you know what? The people today were lied to. They weren't taught the true story. And that's what we're dealing with. So let's start to tell people the true story, which is, you know, when you think of the word Indian or Native American or First Nations, do you think of an image of a person on a baseball shirt? Or do you think of the people that saved your ancestors when they came here to build what is now your family legacy?
Sure.
Do you think about those people who taught them how to live in this incredibly challenging climate? Do you think about the people who, without them, you know, some of the things that we have today would not be a part of our life? You know, those systems of indigenous knowledge are ancient. And they go back thousands of years, and there are medical systems, there's science, there's technology, there's irrigation, there's you know, we were doing everything from intravenous pain medication through bird bones and acetaminophen. Like, these are systems of knowledge that are ancient, they're tried, they're tested, they're true. Wouldn't you want, or I mean, I guess I should say, I want my children to feel really empowered by the legacy of their ancestors, and to know that where they are and where they live is a place where strong relationships are created. You know, not, you know, me growing up in Toronto and feeling racism all the time. I mean, you know, my mom, who would look like she just walked out of a storybook about, you know, First Nations people, just the way she looks and how racist and mean people are. And growing up with that, it gives you a lot of shame. And, you know, to all of those children whose parents went to residential school, who came out at age 18 having been molested and abused and traumatized, and then thrown into society and said, you know, now make something of yourself. To all of those people who have overcome that adversity or have faced that adversity and trauma, to at least have the next generation be one that can be acknowledged for the incredible things that their ancestors and forefathers have provided to everybody. Absolutely.
People, I don't think, also understand that even the original holistic medicine started with the natives. That's where it came from. You know, and people are now embracing it, and they love all this natural, spiritual, it's whether it's on a mental or physical way. People are starting to realize, I think slowly, that a lot of that holistic stuff started with the natives. And from there, too, we have a real appreciation, I think, for the environment because of a lot of the things that, if it wasn't for First Nations people and they're standing up in things like Springwater Park or down in what's going on in Colorado. Let's talk a bit about that. What's your opinion on that? Because I think people need to realize too that the first people who really take action when it comes to the environment tends to be First Nations people.
Absolutely. I think that the work of Indigenous knowledge can really be seen in the relationship to the land. And it's not that everybody believes that or is an advocate for the land or the environment, but that is where Indigenous knowledge comes from. So when you're talking about traditional territories, meaning the land that your people have been on for generations, thousands of years, where you've worked sort of in harmony with the environment to fish and follow the natural order and natural law on how to relate to the environment and to the territory. When those things are compromised, of course you have to stand up to them. Just like if there was a gas leak in your house, or if you had toxic sludge coming out of your backyard, you would want someone to deal with that.
But nobody takes it on better than the First Nations, because let's be honest. Some people might sit there and get offended, but they're like, oh, that bothers me. What else is on? But the First Nations embrace it, because they tend to look at, in my opinion, they tend to really embrace the planet. They embrace the earth. They embrace the native land, where everything started, right?
Well, I think if you want, answers about land and how to work with the land, it's probably good to ask an Indigenous person.
Well,
and that too is kind of generalizing, because it's not just about asking any Indigenous person.
No, you can't just walk up and go, what do you think of this?
Someone who is a knowledge holder and a knowledge keeper, who understands those rules that were passed down, those laws that were passed down. And I think another thing too is, if you're talking about Standing Rock and other things like Standing Rock, the reason why we, or they in that particular situation, fight so hard is because we have to. I mean, that same thing happened to the same water in a predominantly white community not too far from Standing Rock. They don't have to fight that hard, because their issues are dealt with right away.
Yeah, they are.
And that's just pure racism.
It absolutely is.
And, inequity. So, of course, if you're two people standing on the same piece of land, a backyard in a suburban community, and you both are experiencing, the same toxic sludge coming up, and one of those people, let's say, is a disabled person, or is a woman, or is someone who is typically looked at in the margin, and who, doesn't rate as high on the level of importance as someone who is seen in the mainstream as
and it expands from First Nation.
So it's about those two people experiencing the same thing, but one getting way less.
And we don't have balance. We don't have fair. We just don't. So where is a place where people can get more information? Like on Bayfield Street here in Barrie, there's the Resource Center. Do you go there?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay. What sort of stuff? Because let me kind of unpack this a little bit more, because to be honest, there are people, not me in particular, but again, of course, I'm going to say it's not me, but there are people who will say, oh, well, the Indians, they're not like the Indians you see on Dances with Wolves or you see in a movie. It's the Indians that were shown is always whenever they're in the worst situation. We'll see some homeless, drunk Indians downtown Toronto, and that's how they approach it, and they make it look terrible, and it's epidemic, and this is what's affecting all the First Nations. Well, is that true? Like, how bad is it? And what are people...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not true. Those are, it's images that are probably perpetuated by media. But, if you're interested, I would say follow, CBC Indigenous online. Visit the Friendship Center, stay up to date on their Facebook page with what's going on.
What can you get at the Friendship Center? What can they help with?
They have like gatherings and different sessions on various events or powwows or cultural events or drumming circles or reconciliation groups.
Did you go to some of these events?
Yep.
Cool.
You can also, follow in Simcoe County, you can follow the First Nations Métis Inuit committee on the school board, the Simcoe County School Board, for information. You can follow like any Indigenous organization. You can watch APTN, which is the Aboriginal People's Television Network.
Which I've watched, which surprisingly, sometimes I've watched and been drawn in because it's just funny. You think rock stars are stupid, or you think certain people don't get it, and then you watch somebody who's a native Canadian or whatever the right word is, and I'm apologizing right now if I'm screwing it up, but there are people who are on there who are speaking, and they speak eloquently, and they are doctors, they are lawyers, they are our neighbors, and they're not the people you see whenever some places, Fox, whatever, tries to make them look bad.
Yeah.
So you're clearly a great representative of the Indian community, but do you think that there's enough representation from that community?
No, there's not. Because if there was, you would know a lot more.
I would.
You wouldn't be asking these questions if there was good representation.
Well, I tend to turn the news off.
Not even on the news. I'm talking about drama. I'm talking about mainstream television. If that was out there and represented, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It would be a non-conversation, right?
Yeah.
So it's not. There's just, if I had to rely on being solely an actor, and I've been very fortunate in my career that I've really never stopped working in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Part of it, I would say, is like a total fluke.
Yeah.
If I had to rely, though, on that as my sole income,
as a media outlet, out there.
I mean, you're talking about, a sliver of representation in terms of, having an Indigenous person on a TV show, or, I mean, all you have to do is look at your TV guide and see, like, okay, Longmire.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, shows on APTN.
Yeah.
But that's not what everybody's watching. So I think the answer to your question is no, there's not enough representation, little things here and there. Like, as I said, this conversation wouldn't be happening if there was. But in the void of that not being a reality, then this conversation is important.
What right now is probably one of your favorite passions right now, or projects you're working on right now?
I'm doing a TV series right now that I'm in post-production on called Future History.
Okay.
And it's a documentary series kind of addressing a lot of this stuff, but it's the idea of it is to shift a lot of these sort of colonial paradigms where, where we're looking to the other side of the story and trying to uncover that beauty and that strength of the Indigenous perspective, because it's pretty incredible what's happening in the communities in terms of reclaiming knowledge and culture, and that includes everything from science to legal systems to medicine to health to food sovereignty to land and land title to politics to policies. All of those things are actively being reclaimed, and these are systems that existed well before and for way longer than these current problems. So this particular series I'm very passionate about because I'm learning a lot, and I feel like perhaps our audience will learn something too, and
I hope they embrace it, because I think it's something that's really important. It really is important people remember our country. What is the one message from you, Jennifer, to everybody?
I would say that it's probably important across the board to be a seeker, and
I like that.
To ask questions. And that's not just within the parameters of this conversation, it's just in life. Life is massive. It's, as we all know, it's so big. And when you seek, you develop your own perspectives and your own opinions and your own experience. And that is very important for humanity, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you.
We share this planet, and I absolutely adore everything about what you're doing and who you are. And you've been a
Thanks.
great guest today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.